Hello there and welcome to Couldn't Scare Less. I'm your host, Trip from AAA Gaming, and today we're going to be talking about The Mist, the 2007 Frank Darabont film. This new podcast, Couldn't Scare Less, is going to be for horror reviews, discussion, and dissection. We might touch on some thrillers too, but primarily horror. For first episode of this, I wanted to cover what is probably my favorite depressing horror movie. Calling it an action horror, I don't know. At the very least, it's my favorite big budget horror movie. It had a surprisingly large budget, I thought, anyways. Specifically, a budget of $18 million, which 2007. Most of this went into CG, but I think the CG is pretty good. Directed by Frank Darabont. We'll talk more about him later when we get into the the film discussion portion. But you probably know him from Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, and The Walking Dead. You'll actually find a lot of people from The Walking Dead in this film. I watched about 8 seasons of that, and I kind of regret it. But one thing that's worth noting here is that I am going to be starting most of these, basically all of these episodes, with a list of the trigger warnings for the movie and what we will be discussing. So that way, if you are using this to kind of help recommend you horror movies, in the vein of, some of these other big channels like Dead Meat, I want you to know, before you go watch that, what to expect if you're on the more anxious side, like yours truly. I almost said mine truly. I'm using Does the Dog Die? I'll have the Does the Dog Die link in the description, but the Does the Dog Die trigger warnings for this movie include bugs, spiders, child abuse, religious gaslighting, drugs, minor alcohol abuse, restraining, excessive gore, threatening of teeth damage, burning alive, amputation, head squashing, hanging, asphyxiation, moderate torture, bone breaking, death of a child, death by overdose, parent death, jump scares, audio gore, anxiety attacks, mentions of suicide and an actual suicide, use of a mentally unstable person as a source of violence and tension, body dysmorphia. Actually, no, there's not body dysmorphia. Why is that up to... Yes, that's not in this film. I'm going through the triggers, I realize that one's just not there. Claustrophobia, flashing lights of images, not really. It is marked on here. I personally disagree, as someone who is also prone to that. There is not hate speech. Again, it has 9 upvotes for hate speech. There is not. Unless you count hate speech towards country folk. I personally don't think so. Sad ending. Car noises, including honks and tire screeches. Blood, gore, and gun violence. Some other ones I personally made note of that I would have wanted to know that are not on Does the Dog Die? There are visuals of burn wounds, religious and cultish fear-mongering, implied racial tension between characters but never said on screen, child endangerment, leg gore, specifically if you're like me and have, that kind of thing is a thing, very loud storms and discussions of the end times. I will have a YouTube timestamp here for the trigger warning, so you can skip past them or not. We are now past that section, but this is a heavy film, but it's a masterpiece of horror cinema in my eye. It does a great job playing with emotion and hope. Hope is a big thing in this film. It comes and it goes, and it really shifts both the vibe of the film and the actual, emotion of you, the viewer. I'm new at this, so I'm quickly pulling up some IMDB links that I will need later. There we go. And at this point, I will now be transitioning. There'll be another YouTube thingy. Transitioning into the actual talk through scene by scene chronologically of the film. I watched this with my dog Holly on a dog sitting night. And it opens to the sounds of classic jazz and intense thunder. My dog did not like that. As we see our protagonist painting as the power blacks out. It then dissolves nicely into a title card as we see a husband, wife, holding child, looking out a window, right before a tree limb launches through a window, destroying the art room we saw in the cold open. The man's art is ruined, and he relents at the possible loss of work as we transition to the morning time now. We also get some well-acted parental chatter between the two, as we meet our kid actor for the film, Billy. I'm not the biggest fan of children, but Nathan Gamble, actor of Billy in this film, did a good job. Plays James Gordon in The Dark Knight. He was in Bones as Jeannie Frong, and The Goldbergs as Gary Ball. I don't know him for any of those. I've not seen any of those. But he's also in Marley and Me as Patrick, age 10. But I think he does a good job making the child not annoying, which is a rarity. Well, not too annoying, anyways. Just the right amount. As they look across the lake, we get a gorgeous shot of the mountains. And then the camera pans to a destroyed boathouse as their neighbor's old tree fell on it. They talk about a property dispute with said neighbor, who we are introduced to in a whirlwind of profanity, as we hear his chainsaw is not working, and it turns out to be none other than Brooklyn Nine-Nine's Captain Holt and Andre Braugher. He's not in this film quite as much as I would like him to be, but he does a great job when he's in it. If you've not seen Brooklyn Nine-Nine, you might know him from Homicide: Life on the Street as Frank Pembleton. That was from 1993 to 1998. He's also Satch in Frequency, Cassiel in City of Angels, Law and Order Spectrum Victims Unit? No. Special Victims Unit as Bayard Ellis, and Captain Marcus Chaplin on The Last Resort. I think that's what most of you would know him from if you don't know him from 9-9. Our protagonist, David, ends up driving Holt. It's not his name. But for some reason I wrote it as Holt. But at this point in the film, we have not actually heard his name yet. So in the notes up to this point, I just had to call him Holt. And Billy into town. We get one of the few sprinklings of backstories to what's going on through the discussion of the Arrowhead Project and related rumors about such. The Arrowhead Project is this movie's kind of explanation for the calamity that occurs through the mist. We hear bits and pieces later. Basically, it was some sort of secret project to open a portal into another world. It doesn't go so well because they tried to open a window and accidentally open a door, as a character later calls it, and a whole bunch of crap comes through, including this mist and monsters and crap. I've not read the novella, but apparently it's pretty similar to the novella story. I've also heard that this movie's better than the novella. But if I get around to reading it, maybe we'll do an episode comparing the two. Although the movie's immediately dated on its arrival in town, by David Drayton, our protagonist, asks to use a payphone. Hello, 2007. I do not miss you. Phone doesn't work. And then Billy meets up with Billy, and his name's not been said yet, the neighbor, in a very small-towny grocery store, where we'll be spending basically the entirety of the rest of the film. We meet some other characters here through some kind of, as he's walking through the store, he gets this kind of snippet conversations as he passes people, giving us the babysitter of Billy is mentioned here. I accidentally closed the IMDb. As well as the awesome Ollie, grocery store worker, who is one of my favorite characters in this film. I feel like the actor doesn't quite get enough credit for how great he does in it. Toby Jones, also in Hunger Games as Claudius Templesmith, but most people know him as Zola from Captain America. That's what most people will know him from. Quickly looking through his IMDb, is there anything else of note he was in? I can't. Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom. He's a background character. He's Culverton Smith in Sherlock. That's about it. But yeah, most people know him as Aram Zola from Captain America. He does a great job in this film. And we also meet our film's antagonist, Miss Carmody. Miss Carmody, played by... again, I'm scrolling through the IMDb. Who was Miss Carmody? Brain? That's not on the script, because I expected myself to remember this. That's a mistake I will learn quickly. I think I wrote a snippet on her later, so we'll talk about her when we get to that. So we return to our trio with kind of a weird joke about Miss Drayton's awful handwriting, saying that she'd have a great career in New York as a doctor because her handwriting is so bad. They just kind of chatting. We meet more characters. We meet 3 army dudes. The most important of them will be Trooper Jessup. Sam Witwer plays Private Jessup. Sam Witwer is most well known for... he was Darth Maul in Clone Wars and Solo. The voice of Maul. Wild, right? You would not be able to tell from this film that it's the same person. Also, funny note here, there's the school teacher Irene, she's great. And the other one, Hattie, this was my 5th watch through the film, and I could not tell you her name for the life of me. And for whatever reason, I just always forget she's a character in this film. I think the movie does too. Anyways, the small talk ends. Sirens, fire engines, and a military jeep pull in to suspend the Arrowhead soldiers' leave. And then we hear the iconic air raid siren. It plays in a haunting scene because it's mostly otherwise silent except for like the distant air raid siren as a man runs through the mist, through the parking lot, and bursts through the door, covered in blood, proclaiming, "There's something in the mist." And then I think this shot is CG, but it looks really good. Of the mist just kind of enveloping the parking lot as we hear like distant screams and like the shop starts shaking. This opening to the emergency, to the mayhem we will be joined for the rest of this film is really well done in my opinion. Though I don't know where the earthquake comes from. I don't know what the heck that was. Maybe it was one of the bigger creatures coming through the window. I don't know. Or through the portal, rather. Not through the window of the grocery store. We'll get there. And then we start to see everyone go into their emergency mode in different ways. We see a man with a funky mustache claiming that it's a mill fire. Miss Carmody immediately starts talking about it being the end of days, typical religious fanaticism. Bud, the store owner, tries to pathetically usurp order and calm, just like, "That's alright, everyone calm down." We see a woman ask to be accompanied home, to go home to her 2 children because, typical parent style, like, emergency, what about my kids? I feel like this is how a lot of actors, no, what frick? I'm looking at the IMDb. A lot of parents would act in an emergency. Their first thought is, where are my kids? And her begging for help to go out into the mist and find her kids, being met with silence and diverted eyes is really sad. But Melissa McBride acts the heck out of it. She is most well known as being Carol from The Walking Dead. Told you there were a lot of them in this film. Sorry, I'm remembering back on this scene. It's haunting. As she just kind of slowly walks her way towards the exit of the store. As everyone diverts their eyes from this crying mother who's going out into the mist where they just heard someone die. Someone just came in covered in blood. And she's determined to go out in that mist and find her 2 kids. It's really well done. And then Bud, the store owner, decides he has to start mobilizing. He gets the workers to pick up the store from the earthquake. Billy, the kid, just starts crying, asking about mommy, which honestly makes sense. As David sits with Billy and the teachers, we now actually, Amanda joins the group. Amanda Laurie Holden, another Walking Dead alum, Andrea Harrison from The Walking Dead. She's also Renee of The Americans, and she's in The Boys as well as Crimson Countess. But yeah, so we get a weird kind of scene here of them all just kind of nonchalantly sitting down in the aisle as I think at this point it hasn't quite set in what's going on yet for our protagonist. Because they just all kind of sit there, chatting. Billy's crying. And David just ends up dropping off Billy with the two teachers so he can go do plot stuff. Like, it's for some reason with David's character at this point, he's not in emergency mode yet. He just kind of is there. Also, I know there's there's nothing in movie that makes us think those two teachers are lesbians. I choose to ship them as such. I can headcanon whatever I want. Frick you, Frank. They just seem like they'd be great. And then David's actor, David is played by Thomas Jane. Thomas Jane from Deep Blue Sea. He's Carter Blake in that. And I've not seen any of the other things he's in, looking at his IMDb. But he does a really good job. Even if he's kind of unevenly written at certain points, he absolutely kills it. Conveying just great emotion, especially later on in this film. And I just felt like I had to, acknowledge him here. Because, he doesn't look like your stereotypical action horror protagonist that he is for the rest of this film. And it's weird that he is that, given Billy's existence and his need for him to be, have a dad. Billy needs a dad. He needs to stay alive, especially now with the uncertainty of his mother's life. But the actor kills it. I can't give any qualms to that. But one of my few criticisms with this film story is, why would David be this kind of gung-ho, risk his life person when, he has a small child that he's also supposed to be taking care of? I don't know if it's from I just said David King. From the Stephen King novella. But, yeah, it's just, it's a little weird, but I can handle that. And yes, this is a Stephen King novella. Man, Stephen King's really got a thing for the end of the world, doesn't he? And it's a good, unique end of the world. So, I've seen a lot of zombie films. Planning on December just being probably all zombie movies, Undead December. But this is a good, unique take. We see another good, unique take of Stephen King and the end of the world in his film Cell, which I might cover. He's just got a lot of these good apocalyptic scenarios. And this one's kind of Lovecraftian horror aspects to it, which I also dig. But anyways, we then get an over-the-shoulder shot of David walking through the store. We see stuff happen in the background, like Norton, that's the attorney's name, having a meeting with other rich-looking adults. We hear them talking about leaving and when to leave, how to leave. And then, for some reason, David goes into the back room, finds the generator smoking, and just turns it off, and then just falls over a pallet. I know why he's there. He's there so he can be the first one to hear a monster from the mist hitting on the door of the loading dock. It gets all rocking and rolling, rocking and reeling, Barbara Ann, ba 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 ba. But he's here for plot reasons. Doesn't make sense for him to be back there, but he's back there, and he hears weird noises coming from outside. Almost like the sound design for this film is incredibly good, by the way. Who did sound for this film? Thanks for not having that listed, IMDb. Pog. I should have looked it up. I should have found out beforehand, that's my bad. Absolutely kills it. The sound in this movie is haunting, and we get gurgly exhaling noise from outside the door. And as David stands up from having fallen over the pallet, I guess in shock or something, he stumbles into the actual people who should have turned off the generator, the engineers, who apparently work in the back room, loading, unloading. And then he leads them back into the back room for this movie's first actual horror sequence, and it's very well done. The two people in gray, Jim and Myron, they discover the generator's backed up. And then there's a bad boy, Norm, offers to go outside and fix it like a stupid head. David and Jim, they kind of bicker and go back and forth about, shouldn't go out there. And he heard weird noises. Jim gets all city versus country about it. I live in the South right now, but come from the North. So I've heard these kind of bickers back and forth about, country folk knowing more about more, and city folk thinking they're all that, which is definitely heard that at certain times, but there's not the time for it. But while they're bickering, though it's brought up later to David by Ollie that Jim and Myron need to fix this so that they can feel they're at least partially in control of the situation. But they relent. David relents. They open up the loading bay door, and Norm laughs at David about the dangers of the mist. Right as a nasty-looking tentacle shimmies in from under the door, grabs Norm and pops him down to the ground. And it's a nasty-looking tentacle with, spikes on it that grab onto Norman's leg and kind of start ripping the skin off in a beautifully well-done instance of CG plus practical effects. I like CG when it's done to emphasize and work alongside stuff, like the animatronic tentacle here. And it looks so good as, the flesh gets kind of, popped off and ripped off by this tentacle. And then more start coming under into the now partially open loading dock. David and Ollie try to pull Norman back in. Ollie grabs an axe and starts hacking at the tentacles. Jim and Myron just kind of freeze up and sort of hide. For some reason, one of the tentacles eats a bag of dog food, and that's never touched on again. But this scene here with Norm is one of my favorite horror movie kills with CG that are more CG heavy. It's just really freaking good. If you haven't seen this movie, one, why are you listening to this before you see the movie? You should listen to this after you see the movie, so you can, hear a second take on it. Or you can listen to this during the movie, if that's something you decide to do. I don't know why, but I guess you could. Considering doing, movie backing tracks, kind of with, commentary tracks on movies. I don't know if that's something you guys would be interested in. Let me know. But, yeah. Norm gets dragged off into the mist with a blood-curdling scream. And now the argument between David and Jim heats up quite a bit. With the death of Norm. And David says a quote I really like here. He's a kid, he's supposed to be stupid, so what's your excuse? It's kind of an accidentally very good meta line about horror. About how, teenagers being teenagers in horror films is very much a cliche. They're very stupid. But I just think, I don't know, for whatever reason, the context of this, it's after this point, basically everyone's very competent. If you discount the people who join alongside with Miss Carmody's cult thing. But that's more understandable in times of distress, to latch on to whoever is giving you wisdom. Or what appears to be wisdom. Kind of like how the group latches around David later to leave Miss Carmody. For whatever reason, I just stuck onto this line about it being a very good meta quote about horror. And kind of, you get stupid behavior in movies like Friday the 13th that where your characters in a horror movie are very reckless and naive. But this movie's trying not to be that. And with the adults trying to make more rational, thought-through decisions. And it did give me, after this point in the film, my first time watching through, I did, put the adults' decisions under a harsher lens. They're like, okay, if you want your characters to be intelligent, if that's something you're going to tell the audience, then I'm going to hold you to a slightly stricter set of rules than I would. Harsher lens of criticism. And I think it holds up well. We now exit the horror hole as David goes over to Amanda covered in Norm's blood. He quickly changes shirts so Billy doesn't see him covered in blood. Good point. Good dad point, David. Then we get a beer circle as Ollie, Jim, Myron, and David start discussing how they're going to break the news to the rest of the grocery store about there actually being monsters out there in the mist. And they land on talking to Brent Norton, the neighbor, played by Captain Holt, Andre Braugher, about being a top priority to talk to address about this. Because people care what he thinks. He's some big shot attorney. But during the Ring of Blue Ribbon, as I call it, Ollie makes a very good point that not many zombie preppers and stuff think about. When they talk about places to go, one of the common ones is grocery stores. But this grocery store has a wall of plate glass. And you're dealing with monsters. Again, like, plate glass. If you're one of those people who think they survived the zombie apocalypse, and you think going to a grocery store is a good idea, congratulations, you are, in fact, incorrect. Because, as they talk about here, grocery stores are not meant to be durable buildings. Anyways, small tangent aside. David then talks to Brent about the tentacles. The Fellowship of the Can offers with Brent, confers with Brent, but he doesn't buy it. He thinks it's some kind of weird prank because... And Brent won't go see the proof that they're offering because David won a lawsuit against Brent, and Brent uses some choice words against country folk, writing it off without seeing any proof because he thinks that it's just going to be a rubber snake and something in the back and they're all going to laugh at him, and he doesn't want to get laughed at, apparently. Even in this life or death situation where these people sound very, very genuine and don't really have any logical reason to do this, past Brent's own mental wall of feeling wronged by this David person. So therefore, these other people with David clearly would want to help him, don't wrong me back. It's weird mindset. Honestly, contextually, I would infer Brent would be a MAGA hat wearer. But who knows, maybe he's a Democrat and a tool and stupid. Those also exist too, but I just had the mental picture of Brent wearing a MAGA hat, and it was quite funny to me while writing the script. Obviously, it's understandable to not believe the Blue Ribbon Boys, but, refusing to go see their claims of blood at a dead monster carcass because Brent thinks they'll laugh at him for trusting their word. It's weird. I call it strange. If I couldn't name a list of people who would I'd react identically, insults and all, but doesn't make it more correct. But Andre Braugher acts the hell out of this blow-up, and Ollie defends David like a champ, even to his boss Bud, who rolls up when they're asking about the severity of the situation. And writing this, I got chills at how actually tense and well-acted this scene is. These people arguing and bickering about what's out there and what's in there. What's out in the mist and what's in the store is really well done. Like, it's... The interpersonal dialogue is so real and well done that I actually felt anxious as if I was listening to an actual argument. It's really well done in that regard. If this movie were newer, we definitely would have got a porn joke here about the tentacles. But instead, Bud blames alcohol until they take him to go see the gross tentacle along with some random biker dude who will become more important later. And if it's... The tentacle here has 2 points. At first it looks great. Then it looks less great when they poke it and it starts to dissolve. I'm not huge on that effect. But as it dissolves, then we get a cut into our film's second act. As the scene dissolve as the camera switches also could have used some more time, in my opinion. It needed some extra love there. But, however, holy crap. We now get one of my favorite scenes in this film, the porcelain altar prayer scene. As a religious person, I'm kind of biased towards a good heartfelt prayer scene, but There's a reason Marcia Gay Harden won a Saturn for this film. Marcia Gay Harden playing Miss Carmody. That's the name I could remember earlier. I knew it was later on the script, and here it is. She may be whack and sounds like my flat earther uncle. However, this scene of her begging God to help her in hopes of earning her way to heaven by showing others his righteous truth is really freaking good. Obviously, she's wrong about the idea that, you need to earn your way into heaven and stuff like that, but it's really good. Though she's mean to Amanda as a two-faced hag, like most holier-than-thou religious folk are, this scene of her praying and crying out before God in the face of all this madness that's happening in the store is really good. It makes you feel for her, because she hasn't done the weird crap yet. This makes you feel for her as her just being a deeply religious person. Wrong, sure, but really wanting people to have a good eternity after this. It's really well done. One of the best, most well-written villains I've seen in horror, who's believable. There are some good horror villains I like. For example, I really like the rich guy from Would You Rather, played by Jeffrey Combs. But he's more of a maniacal person. And I think Miss Carmody does a great job being a grounded villain. We then get 3 definitive sides to the group dynamic in the store henceforth after that porcelain altar scene, and these groups will change and evolve as the plot points occur. And this idea of factions evolving, trying to survive an apocalypse together, is basically what The Walking Dead would be a few years later. And I think that the 2-hour feature film that we're dealing with here does it better than the many, many seasons of The Walking Dead the AMC cursed us with. I did enjoy TWD originally. As a zombie fan, I kind of felt obligated to see it through. Maybe we'll talk about The Walking Dead specifically in some regard, we'll see. But the 3 factions that we'll be talking about throughout the rest of this review. We have the skeptics, led by Brant Norton. We have the religious fanatics, or as I'll probably call them, the cult, led by Miss Carmody. And David's group of the realists. If they were more drinking scenes later, I would keep making the beer puns I have been, but alas, that is the last use of alcohol in this film. The realists are correctly worried that duct taping fertilizer and dog food to the window is an insufficient protection from the things that go bump in the mist. Because kind of as these groups kind of form in different parts of the store, they're working on reinforcing the plate glass with what they've got. But as someone with the religious background I do and the religious teaching and study I have, I could talk about, I could probably do a whole thing talking about all the Bible references in this film and how Miss Carmody uses a lot of actual correct quotes just wildly incorrectly. Because you can make an argument that a mist-like event could occur in the Revolution-style apocalypse of these kind of foobar monsters coming through. Though her first sermon, while this reinforcing is going on, angers a lot of the trap shoppers, understandably. Honestly, though, she's whack. She's absolutely whack. Even though that the porcelain altar prayer is a really touching scene, and we see other bits of humanity from her throughout this, not to the extent of that. She just kind of goes downhill real quickly. But she's a very wonderfully unsettling antagonist that I think really helps make this film as good in my eyes as it is. She brings out a lot of visceral and realistic reactions out of everyone. It helps to accelerate the end-time suffering of those involved. Our next scene of non-filler is we get the gang discussing how to defend the place. If monsters do come and break through the glass, when they learn that Ali, despite Bud treating him like dog water, is our tropial, unassuming end-of-the-world badass, not the biker, because he now has a gun, and apparently was a state champion winning marksman for pistol shooting. Which, okay, sure, I buy it. This scene is, though, intercut with the skeptics trying to leave to seek rescue. Which, you could make an argument that this is the correct thing to do. If monsters weren't involved. Monsters are involved, so it's less, good to do this. But they're going to go and try to leave. The biker does something pretty unabashedly badass, where he leaves alongside the skeptics to grab a shotgun out of someone's pickup truck that's out there and to let them know how far you get using a labyrinth-style rope around the waist, with 300, I believe, feet of rope. The scene of everyone slowly strolling into the mist is pretty free of visible violence or monsters. We don't really see or hear anything for almost 2 minutes as they're getting ready to go and then go. All we get is some creative shots with the rope around the biker from the inside of the store's perspective, going taut in the hands of a bunch of the realists. And then starts pulling out with intense force as it goes out into the mist. You hear some very, very, very distant screaming for like only a second. You have to have the volume very high to hear it. The rope hold is an excellent way that the movie keeps the horror out of frame and still terrifying. Holding its cards and waiting for later on in the film to drop the scary monsters more visually. And it ends with the rope returning covered in blood and gore to eventually reveal that all that is left of the biker are his legs. And it is beautifully morbid that I wish we had more of in this film, because I'm not a big fan of the bugs we'll encounter very soon. As I think they're a bit predictable in what they are and how they look, and they're like not too unique, at least given more modern monster movies. But another thing I'm not so big on is the conversation we get between soldier Wayne Jessup and the babysitter that results in some kissing and wonders about how they wish things between them could have happened differently. And it's an entirely pointless scene that exists only to make us feel bad when one of them or both of them definitely die. I typically try to only suggest a theme is useless when I can offer a feasible alternative. And for this one, I have one. Whereas, how about we get a scene of David getting emotional about his wife being home in the mist, far away with basically no hope at all. We saw what happened. He now knows how dangerous the mist is as they leave and then all die. And this movie is an emotional roller coaster, and a scene like that would have added to one of these future downturns in emotion, I think. But the next scene are the bugs that I warned about in the trigger warning section. A big old bug that looks like a prehistoric mosquito lands on the window outside, making some oinking noises for some reason. They're like creepy, sure, but like if you listen to it without the audio, without the visuals, it sounds like they're oinking. And I think they're attracted to the lights inside. So as a bunch of them land on the windows, everyone is kind of entranced by this horrific beauty. And the score shifts into a more look at this and a less run from this for a little bit until the beat drops as we see a big pterodactyl-looking motherfricker swoop in and eat one of the bugs off the window. David and Ollie run to douse the lights because they've kind of figured out, oh, big bugs turn off the lights. Duh. The engineers are throwing on the floodlights because they misunderstood what was happening. We hear the glass crack, so we get some more misused Bible quotes from Miss Carmody as she watches. For some reason, the pterodactyls look to me like a knockoff of Ridley from Metroid. I'm going to put a side-by-side here. I'm going to put a picture of one of the pterodactyls, and I'm going to put a picture of Ridley from Metroid, specifically his appearance in Smash. Because for whatever reason, I can't get the two out of my head. They just look, I don't know why. It's an invasive thought I can't get past. Anyways, one of these Ridley knockoffs makes a hole in the glass, and all the creepy crawlies start flying in, making gross noises with mixed moments of good and bad CG. We get some very uneven CG in this bit. It is, however, a 15-year-old movie. I'm not too surprised. Also, Sally the babysitter goes out in such a pathetic way here. I hate it. I knew it was happening because of the scene she had with Wayne Jessup right before this. She barely fights off against the mosquito-looking bug that stings her. But we do get some gnarly-looking kills here from both Sally's death dying to the sting, and then one of the terrors just neck bites a dude on the ground. And someone gets the bright idea to help using a flaming mop. And we end up with an amazing fire stunt here as a guy runs around on fire holding up a mop as it also burns. He doesn't die here, but I just felt like I needed to call it out because both the fire stunt's great, the burn effects are great. It does result in a flaming pterodactyl flailing through the store, has some really good effects on it. Also, since I'm talking about plot stuff here, I feel like I have to include the fact that Miss Carmody has an important moment here for her plot-wise, where a bug lands on her and doesn't sting her or do anything because she stands still as praying. She thinks it's because she's a divine vessel of God. We know it's because she's not moving or making any sudden movements for the bug to be scared by. Though after this moment, I have to remind you that kids named Billy are always the worst in every show or movie ever. Do not name your kid Billy, ever. Just don't do it. They will be a pain in the butt as a kid, and they'll probably grow up to be a racist neckbeard in the future. Now you know. Because Billy's an idiot in this scene and almost gets himself killed. The monster gets shot by Ollie, who's great. But, we get a fade to looking outside the store after the chaos inside is submerged. As a dog sounds like a dog eating the creature's legs. The creature's legs? No. A dog creature eating the biker's legs. Diplopia is hard. I'm reading off a script that I wrote, and Diplopia makes it difficult. You get some very gross in-your-ear chewing noises. But we also now learn that the idiot who set himself on fire was named Joe, and he's alive. For now. He doesn't want to be alive. He's asking to be shot in the head. That's how much pain he's in. It makes sense, as he's covered in third-degree burns. The burn makeup on him looks good, but it kind of reminds me of a red Electro for some reason. But while Joe is talking about suicide, Amanda discovers that Hattie is already sadly committed it, having died to a drug OD from some painkillers. Or some medicine, I would assume painkillers. Some medicine she had in her purse. And suicide comes up in End of the World stories a lot. But I think for good reason. Because, like, when there is no world to live for, there's no world that you think there will be afterwards. Especially if you believe in some kind of afterlife. It's not the most unrealistic thing in the world to try and cash out and get to whatever you think comes after life. It's a bummer. It's a really sad scene, especially if, you're sensitive in that area like yours truly. But after that, after Hattie's suicide specifically, David is now very dead set on going to the pharmacy and leaving because Miss Carmody and her cult has gotten out of control. The scene is a little by the book, in my opinion, about where they start talking about around a barrel, whether humans are an ultimately primal or an ultimately good and moral species. I don't really know where I fall in that discussion, having experienced some pretty awful things from humanity, but in the case of the discussion in film, I think it's a little blunt for my taste. It's a little plainly stating things, which I'm not always hot on. I'm also going to take off my headphones because I realize I'm not using them, so I don't know why I have them on. They're just making extra noises. Our gang of survivors are now headed to the pharmacy. Even though Joe is more dead than alive, David and his action hero energy wants to save him, medicate him, and bring him with them, I guess. For some reason, the pharmacy had their doors propped open, which makes no sense to me. But the gang gear up, go out into the mist. Miss Carmody says that it'll bring back more wrath upon them. David and his crew don't care. As they wander through the store in the dark, it takes them a while to realize the growing amount of spider webs as they get deeper and deeper into the store. Until that is, that they start hearing scuttling legs of something freaking weird. The sound design, again, is impeccably good. Very creepy, very, very gross. Until someone has the bright idea to look up, and they see a whole bunch of bodies covered in spider webs. And, one of them pops up to grab Jim the mechanic like a Halloween decoration. And it's the MP officer from earlier, who, hauntingly mutters, "It's all our fault! It's all our fault!" As his body starts bubbling open with baby spiders, and one of the grossest shots. It's the grossest shot of the first or second grossest shot of the movie. And it's good. But then adult spiders start showing up, shooting acid webs. And they basically look like lighter colored versions of the bugs from earlier, just without wings. They're a little too similar looking for my liking. But death by monster spiders is an awful, awful way to go. And we lose several of our survivors, specifically Bobby, brother of Joe, to an acid-burned leg bleed out, and someone who I didn't actually recognize getting acid burned in the face by a spiderweb. Very good horror sequence here. There's not a lot for me to touch on because of how tight it's done in film. It's mostly great sound design, and just the terror of these gross-looking spiders. Jim has kind of returned, though, from this pharmacy experience a broken man. Broken enough to start listening to Miss Carmody and to join in on the calls for survival through expiation of blood. And Joe ends up dying in the night to his burn wounds after their pharmacy trip, or during their pharmacy trip. And David wakes up from a very long pass out to see that Miss Carmody has accelerated the decline of humanity in a way that makes sense from a plot perspective, and I can realistically see happening. I'm not at all surprised that it would happen this way, and it sucks. All these otherwise probably good or neutral people falling in with this culty calls for expiation and sacrifice to try and make the problem stop. Because in these kind of moments of end of the world, it's not too uncommon for people to just run to whoever seems to have answers. Speaking of answers, the two soldiers besides Wayne Jessup have found their own answer and have hanged themselves. But Jim finds out about it and grabs Wayne, throws him out to the fanatics, and just runs with it. Carmody has a sermon here talking about the things that she thinks brought about the fall of humanity in the eyes of God. And it's some crazy stuff, including walking on the moon was anti-God, splitting atoms was anti-God, stem cells were anti-God, and especially abortions are the thing that brought God's wrath on man. That's a quote there. Or at least it's a summarized quote there. And it's a scene that's honestly on the disturbing side, as a crowd of religious fanatics are praying and crying out in celebration as they beat and stab Wayne before throwing him outside into the mist. Gave me vibes from of Hale Payman from Hereditary in the sound design here. It's very unsettling. But two fun facts about this scene, because I don't want to dwell on it too long, just because it's it's disturbing in a not so fun way for me personally. The person who, in chef clothes, who stabs Jessup is named Mr. Mackey from South Park, which I found funny. And the beast in the mist who kills Wayne after he's thrown outside is, according to my research, directly based on the Acklay from D&D, which I thought was nifty. This movie has a lot of fades to black, probably too many, but we do get another one here, as it fades nicely into another whisper scene between father and son, Billy and David, where Billy asks his father to extra special promise to not let the monsters get him. And dawn arrives, and with it the escape to the land cruiser. David is done with Miss Carmody's crap, and as they approach their exit, she's sitting there, spinning a knife, with Mr. Mackey and Jim also with knives encircling the group. And they have an argument here, talking about things like privilege, which is really funny with 2022's context. If you're not going to watch this film, at least try and find this scene, just because it's really funny with the modern context for how the word privilege is used these days. Miss Carmody wants to sacrifice Billy, shocker, child sacrifice in a cult movie scenario, who would have thought? And Amanda as well, but is put down by Ollie, popping around in her torso through a jar of a jar of milk, and then a headshot, ending an incredible performance by Marcia Gay Harden as one of the most detestable villains in horror, who is both still grounded and believable. She absolutely kills it. And it's now time for them to leave the grocery store. Our group of realists heads out into the mist, resulting in Ollie getting eaten by the Acklay, our remaining engineer Myron dying to a spider. Mustache Man from earlier dies to 4 spiders with a Wilhelm scream death. Bud runs back into the store, and we get a side panning shot of survivors lined up against the window from the inside as David's Land Cruiser pulls out the outside. Chilling music starts playing. And we get our final act as our survivors go through Misstown, Maine. It's not called that. With some very gothically chilling sounding choir music. They go to the Drayton's house. We see the wife is dead in a spider cocoon through the broken window. Although it looks like she's suspended in ice rather than webs, but it's neither here nor there. It still looks fine for 2007. They pass a school bus with a dead kid inside. Rip. It looks like the spiders again. And as they leave towards Portland, they see a huge eldritch-looking something. I don't know how to describe what the frick it is. It looks like an eldritchly tentacled, like, elephant or bison. I'll put a picture of it on screen because it looks amazing, especially with 2007 CG to make that. Because as far as I can tell, there's nothing practical there. That's just a really well fused together CG shot. I don't think it's where the tentacles earlier came from. I think that'd probably be a different monster. But shortly after that, the car runs out of fuel as the choir and the music in the non-diegetic music builds. Horrific monster noises can be heard from outside the vehicle. We get the film's ending. If you haven't watched the film and plan on it, watch it before this, if you can handle it. Because this scene is one of the saddest scenes in cinema, and I wish I hadn't had it spoiled. The adults exchange looks. Amanda cries some silent tears as David picks up the snub-nosed revolver Ollie had been using this film. The adults kind of exchange nods. They open up the revolver to find only 4 shots and 5 occupants. But as the viewer, you're not like, okay, this is dark they're talking about and thinking about it. But like, they're not serious, right? Especially as Billy wakes up and his eyes go wide, but then you get 4 gunshots and a cut to David screaming out in pain and despair as there are no bullets left for him. He's mercy killed everyone in his car with him, including his little boy Billy. It's a very depressing ending that gets worse. As David screams out, begging a monster to take him, the choir in the non-diegetic tone returns as a tank rolls into view. The music builds again and the mist clears. As a truck of survivors, including the mom from the beginning with her 2 kids, pass by. The soldiers have dispatched the mist and are killing the monsters, and David's group was less than a minute from rescue, and just didn't know it. David cries out, broken by the cruel twist of fate that befell him. And that is 2007's The Mist. That's the end of the summary portion of the film. This movie's fucking dark, man. It's depressing and it's incredible. Love this film. Incredible music, incredible visuals. Great plot as well. Primarily focusing on religion's use to manipulate the hopeless and the poor and stuff like that. Parallels to real life, how religion has been used historically to manipulate people in times of crisis. You can see that recently in things like COVID. We'll be talking about another COVID-adjacent movie next week in the Mayhem 2019. But also, you could make some talks about how cruelty of nature and the cruelty of fate, where unknowingly the world works to the demise of men. At least that's a belief. But I specifically think this movie works as an amazing allegory to, like, depression and mental health. And this movie's super freaking depressing, and I think it gives able-bodied people and able-minded people an understanding of despair. I think this movie builds, like, fake despair, like film despair, better than any movie I've ever seen, any book I've ever read, any song I've ever heard. And it's really good. I've watched this movie in some low points in my life. Especially now that it's on Netflix, it's much more accessible. As someone who no longer owns any physical films because of their move. And, man, it makes you feel low, but it's almost a good thing. Because you know it's a film, you know it ends. And it almost kind of gives you a nice emotional reset sometimes. That might just be me being broken. But that's something I draw from this. Also, it's haunting. It's very haunting. Kind of in the same way as like The Conjuring, where it kind of makes you feel like at unease throughout its whole runtime. This is another movie that does that very well. There's also things could be discussed about this movie's the importance of human instinct and gut and, you know, how humans are by nature. you could talk about. There's not a lot like I'm really gonna dig into in this movie in terms of, you know, bigger messages, because there's not a lot of that. But I will say that this movie is probably my favorite. It's definitely my favorite Stephen King film, arguably my favorite horror film, and I specifically wanted to, you know, talk about this film to start my talk on the podcast, because horror films are the best film for eliciting emotion and making you feel things and making you understand a message. And I wanted to talk about the most depressing film in cinema, in my opinion, to show one side of how this horror can make you feel, and then next week with Mayhem 2019, we will be talking about the other way it can make you feel, catharsis. I think it's a nice duo there. But yeah, I've always wanted to see this film in black and white version, because that's how Frank Darabont originally wanted it to be shown. I would love to do that at some point. I just don't have a way to do that at the moment. This movie is freaking incredible. Go watch it. It's on Netflix if you've got it. I think that's the only place to watch it, but I'll check. Before I wrap, links will be in the description. Yeah, just available on Netflix for free. You can rent it on Prime, but on Amazon, but I'm not going to link that, because frick Amazon. No, I didn't say that. I forgot. They basically they pay my checks when it comes to Twitch. Though it's, you can rent it from Redbox for $2 if you don't have Netflix, or you can pirate it. I don't care. You do you. And next week, we'll be talking about Mayhem, and on Twitter, at ScarelessPod. There's a poll to pick our movie we'll be covering after The Mist. It is going to be a Jeffrey Combs film. It will either be Reanimator or the film I mentioned earlier, Would You Rather. So please vote in that poll. I would like to cover what you guys want to listen to. And thanks for listening, and remember, be good people. Yes, I stole that from Dead Meat. Why did I say that? It's not my channel, a tagline. Peace out, guys.